What is a personal story you have that you don't tell because it sounds made up? Not my story but my dad's. While my dad was getting his master's in sports management, he had a project of coming up with a sporting event and planning out the logistics of it and all that jazz. The idea was having a golf tournament that included the PGA Tour, the WPGA, and the Senior Tour. His professor told him and his classmates he worked on the project with that it was not a good idea and that it would not get any traction. Fast forward a couple of years and what do you know, it is a televised event. The professor had taken the idea for his own and my dad never got any credit for it. Me and a buddy were at a gaming convention, playing tabletop games. I finished up early, but my buddy's match was dragging on. I went to the kiosk and bought this, that and the other. I went back to my buddy and watched for a bit. Since it was dragging on, I asked him if I could go back to the kiosk and get him something. He said thank you, and asked for 6 items. I pulled those exact 6 items out of my bag right then and there, emptying my bag. Both my buddy and his opponent looked at me in stunned silence for about 6 seconds and then called me a witch. I performed a drug exorcism on my stepbrother who took a box worth of over-the-counter 90s drug Chlorseidin, which leads to basically dissociation, and hallucinations, and warped reality and slurred speech. I put my hand on his head and casted out the fuckadoopness. He held his head in the air and opened his mouth and did a convulsion for 10 seconds and was stone cold sober and was perfectly coherent. The high is supposed to last a good 6-10 hours and he had done it before as did other friends, but this was just 2 hours in. Always stuck with me. My wife's grandmother was engaged to one of the Anheuser-Busch sons before her eventual husband stole her heart. He was a truck driver. My mother was engaged to a local man who made his money in tobacco and then became one of the largest landowners in the US, before my father intimidated him into leaving her alone so he could have her. My father was an accountant. The man's current net worth is $2.5 billion. Now, my wife is a teacher and I work in finance. Mortgage payment is still due each month on the 8th, pensive face. Broke a friend's arm once in an arm wrestling match. Nothing to do with exceptional size or strength on my end but everything to do with extremely unexceptional form on his part. On the brink of defeat he rotated his entire torso perpendicular to our handlock and cranked with everything he had. The break sounded like a rifle shot, nasty spiral fracture that took a while to heal. We laugh now of course, but the locals who know the place may be wondering why the table has been gone for 10 years. I got late on a Greyhound bus back in 2008 on a trip across Canada, left from southern Ontario headed to Vancouver, BC. Met a lady around my age on the bus and we hit it off, fucked at night with her on my lap and a nearly full bus around us at 2 a.m. The bus even stopped and the driver switched at the border during our little fun session. Second last row on the bus, one dude behind our seats, some random older lady across the aisle. Still one of my favorite memories. I got very sick when I was in middle school. Like seriously sick. I wasn't even able to walk. I used to crawl to bathroom. Standing up straight used to make everything look inverted. I was also getting weird rashes on my body. I also had very severely headaches, non-stop for months. We went to many doctors, but nothing worked. Painkillers did nothing, doctors couldn't diagnose the disease. Then one day, I woke up and it was gone. Months of pain gone in an instant. A couple of friends and I were messing around in an abandoned quarry. I slipped off the edge and fell about 60 feet only to be saved from death by a tree branch getting caught between my boot and the laces. My friends found some of the strange blue plastic rope that you find near industrial sites and hauled my terrified 10-year-old self back to the top. I've done some stupid stuff, but that is by far the most idiotic, and no one believes it even happened. I woke up a little late one morning, around 9 a.m., and I saw I had a missed call from my dad who I was staying with at the time. I tried calling back but he didn't answer. I was going to go back to sleep but I kept getting this horrible feeling in the pit of my stomach. I just knew something bad happened. I went to go look for him and found him in the floor of the kitchen. He had heart attack. He's alive still, couple stints put in and he's all good. A few days ago I was having some street food with my friends. It started raining so we were standing under a small roof. We stood there for 30 minutes or something and went out on our way. I started driving and just like laying down I saw a crowd and a bike destroyed on the roadside. I went home only to discover that it was my aunt and her granddaughter. They had a horrible accident and my aunt was rushed to the hospital. She thankfully survived. When I was a younger man, I had a little thing you could call a massive drinking problem. One Friday night I went to a mate's house, began getting into it. Next memory is me coming to in a bus stop, and my undies and someone else's t-shirt, with only a shrink-wrapped package of plant matter next to me. Turns out it was roughly 4 kilograms of weed, and I was in a city 300 kilometers from home. So that's the story of how I gave up drinking. Saw a shadow entity levitating on the pavement of my house, really similar to a trilobite in shape. It was following the room's perimeter, kinda hiding in the shadows. Then, it went under the sofa where I was laying. I thought I was dreaming when my sister told me if I saw that weird insect too. Scared the hell out of me because it was big and levitating. We later call our dad, but whatever thing was, it was gone. I had traveled several states to visit my boyfriend. We broke up. My mom drove 8 hours to come pick me up. On the 8-hour drive back, yes, I thanked her profusely. As I was sobbing, a group of bikers drive by. Like full-on biker gang, matching leather jackets, all of that. Except when we saw their faces we realized they were all 75-year-old ladies. The epic granny bikers did make me feel better about the whole ordeal. I'm not a NASCAR fan, but my family is somewhat royalty. My great uncle used to race and even beat Richard Petty back in the day. The trophy is fairly large. He also held the patent for the early car chassis within NASCAR. My great aunt used to babysit Dale Earnhardt Jr. That side of the family runs some mechanic operation, and when I visit I get to sometimes sit in the wrecked cars from the previous Sunday races. I was drunk and thought a maniac was going to bury a little person alive in a duffel bag, so scooped up duffel bag and ran. Had to jump 2 fences to escape maniac, throwing duffel bag over, crying and apologizing to the little person. Turns out I just robbed a homeless person of every possession they owned. The next day I made amends. I still feel bad for doing what I thought in my drunken mind was the right thing. When I was like 5, I stole what I thought was just a very fluffy puppy out of a man's basement with my older cousin. When we took it back to the woods, I asked my cousin why it lived in the woods, and he told me it was a special kind of puppy. Then we ran into the mama bear and it all clicked, and we had to race a bear on his junky quad that only had 3 tires. My mom never let him babysit after that. Wonder why. Lost my father in a graveyard at night before cell phones were a thing. I was a teenager. We had to drive without a license into town to call the cops from a restaurant just to guide them back to my dad, who comes out behind a gravestone with his hands up like he's being arrested. When this happened, we swore we'd never tell my mom because she'd never let my dad take us anywhere again. Now I'm telling Reddit, haha. I've told this story but it does sound made up. Once I was standing on a small bridge over a lake by my house with a group of my friends. I was about 12 at the time. All of a sudden I was picked up and thrown off the railing into the lake. I still have scars on the arms from trying to grab onto the bridge. I swam to the shore and an older kid came up to me and said, "Oh, sorry, I thought you were some else." Last summer, while swimming at a busy beach, I got caught in a rip current and had to be rescued by a lifeguard. Before I was rescued, a crowd gathered. When I finally got pulled out, exhausted, disheveled, covered in seaweed, dizzy, disoriented, tits spilling out of my bathing suit, etc., everyone started to clap. Most humiliating moment of my life, but also my only literal and then everyone clapped story. My 5-year-old sister tried to kill me multiple times when I was a baby toddler. And I remembered one of them from childhood, but the rest of the attempts came as dreams when I was pregnant with my first child. I confirmed them all with my father. No, they didn't take her to see anyone. Yeah, the 70s. I got given swimming lessons though in case she tried to drown me again. Oh, I tell them all, just follow it up with, "Yeah, I know that sounds unbelievable." Actually had a friend tell me that if she didn't know and trust me she'd think I'd made it all up. I think it says more about the listener being sheltered than it does about my story or what happened to me. There were witnesses that certainly don't have a hard time believing it, haha. When Taylor Swift was just starting out, I was at a concert she was opening for. After her set she ended up at a table outside of my section signing posters and stuff. Nobody was there wanting her autograph. I went to the bathroom and then hung out with her for like 30 minutes so she wasn't alone. If she has any songs about the one who got away, I think they are about me. I got an offer to try out for a supposedly huge modeling business in Sweden when I was at a beach there with family. Random lady walks up to me and says something about her working for a big modeling business and me having potential and that she was waiting for me to get up so she could talk to me, etc. I was weirded out and wanted to go get falafel, so I declined. Lol. When I was little, maybe around 6 or 7, I got to play with a lion cub at a fireworks show on the 3rd of July. We were at my uncle's apartment complex, and my parents didn't believe me that the lady next to us had a baby lion. Turns out, That Lion Cub was en route to the local sushi still there and they decided to first traumatize her with fireworks? Lol. Next door to my childhood home was this vacation cottage, owned by an older English couple, Mr. and Mrs. Edgar. They were fascinating people, very upper crust, posh accents etc., but lovely, and I spent as much time as possible with them. At one point, Mr. Edgar had dealings with Walt Disney, and apparently the evil butler from the Aristocats was named after him. I went on a solo hike and got lost in the woods for 412 days. I haven't eaten much other than some snacks I packed and very minimal water. I was definitely dehydrated and probably should have went to the hospital but just went home and got ready for work the next day and acted like nothing happened. No one would believe me anyway, so I don't even mention it. When I was 14, Mika and my boyfriend were doing it in my room. My mom was knocking on the door asking what's that sound like. I couldn't hear her clearly. We stopped for a second, but I told him to keep going on. But 2-3 seconds later she knocked heavily. And we were both dying of fear. I was telling him stop dressing and just get under the bed. I have a friend who hasn't seen him for years, hit me up one day, and asked for a favor, and I did my best to help them. In the last 6 years last time I saw him until he hit me up, we didn't talk much, and I didn't know that now he is a multimillionaire. He wanted to gift me 10 bitcoins when it was like 48k as a thank you. I didn't accept. We guessed the names of 5 strangers and they all showed us their one believes us man, so we don't bother telling it someone anymore, and I don't know how the hell we guessed it, but I will always remember the faces when we guessed the names of the first 3. They were friends group amouth. It was like y'all know us from somewhere?